How can an offense that carry death penalty, a judge reduce it to 20 years in prison? That is not acceptable. But he has violated the laws passed by the parliament. Number three, sir, and this will be the last.
Has that happened in Nigeria already?
It has. Somebody convicted of terrorism was sentenced to 20 years in prison. When the law says, act of terrorism, if convicted, shall attract death penalty, no judge has a right to pronounce less than that. It is only when you have implemented the law, interpret the law, not the sentiment of a judge, the will of the people as conveyed in a law, then the president can decide if there are reasons for him to do so, whether to commute or to reduce. Death penalty or terrorism. This parliament is on record as having done that. Mr. President, I am troubled when, after all the efforts that security agencies and the prosecuting authorities have to invest to secure conviction, because unfortunately the state cannot behave like a mob. So you have to prosecute, follow due process. I am troubled by the conflicting judgment by various high court judges. Where the law says, act of terrorism, if convicted, shall attract death penalty, no judge has a right to pronounce less than that. It is only when you have implemented the law, interpret the law, not the sentiment of a judge, the will of the people as conveyed in a law, then the president can decide if there are reasons for him to do so, whether to commute or to reduce. How can an offense that carry death penalty, a judge reduce it to 20 years in prison? That is not acceptable. But he has violated the laws passed by the parliament. Number three, sir, and this will be the last.
Has that happened in Nigeria already?
It has. Somebody convicted of terrorism was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
No.
Can I be allowed to land? The civil senator, you have, Mr. President, that is the leader of Assad. They have a group.
You have 30 seconds.
A terrorist group called Assad.
You have 30 seconds to land, but please be guided.
Okay.
Let's concentrate on the issue in discussion.
I will be guided. These are our people. For example, somebody allegedly kills someone who came to attack him on his farm. And because he killed in self-defense, the man was sentenced to death. But there is no evidence that those who have come to attack farmers and kill farmers, there is no evidence that they have been so convicted, sentenced to death. These are some of the issues we have to deal with so that nobody is given any excuse to misunderstand what is clearly a national challenge.
Many people who, rightly feel like this was injustice meted on Nnamdi Kanu.
Absolutely. And all Nigerians, despite irrespective of region, have to have a voice. And all voices must be listened to, must be heard. I say this because earlier on I'd said that, that what a number of people have said in some quarters, including the former minority leader of the Senate, Senator Einaya Abaribe, is that it seems as if it was like predetermined, it was an action against the region of the Southeast, that it was selective justice in some quarters. And when you hear cases like this terrorist who was convicted, masterminding acts of terrorism, who was given 20 years, you can then understand why people are saying that. I had to call Mr. Okpara to order earlier on during the interview because I also don't feel that the ethnic narrative is good for national unity and to not further incite violence or aggression in certain parts. What we're trying to push is the spirit of national unity. But in doing so, part of that is to ensure that there's fairness and justice indeed across all levels, across boards, and there mustn't be a perception that people are treated differently based on which region they belong to. Now, names like the situation that happened with Sunday Igboho is coming up again. People are talking about terrorists from the north who are given 5-year sentences, and people who actually perpetrated large-scale acts of terrorism, giving kids gloves. In some parts, we even saw them being, given amnesty. We talk about rehabilitation, de-radicalization, and you ask, why is the same treatment or suggestion or solution not given to what is happening to Nnamdi Kanu and the Southeast? And so these are the questions. I don't agree with giving amnesty and, asking terrorists. I believe that terrorists should face the full wrath of the law across board. That's what I believe, and a number of people have called for that. You don't, and we've seen that it doesn't work in the northeast. And so I believe that this is a very delicate matter. It has a political slant to it. It is very sensitive, and that's why even when we speak on this table, we're careful because we have to ensure that above all the, yes, there's the legal perspective, there's the political and personal perspective, but there's also the spirit of peace and unity in Nigeria, so that we don't further divide along ethnic lines based on what is seen as selective justice.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you 100%. This idea of de-radicalization and reintegration of these terrorists, I believe it should be scrapped. And I'd like to bring up also the topic of, Bishop Honor, who we discussed last week, where he talked about the fact that, terrorism, there is a death sentence for it. How many people have we seen convicted, have we seen given the death penalty for these such heinous crimes that have been plaguing our nation for decades?
This is one of the things we constantly complain about in this country, and yet some people quickly say we are just being emotional or exaggerating the situation. But how can anyone look at what is happening and not feel deeply concerned? We are talking about a known terrorist, someone who was openly involved in attacks that led to the deaths of innocent Nigerians. There is no confusion about his identity, no argument about whether he was involved. Everyone knows what he did. And despite all of that, despite the pain he caused and the lives that were lost, a judge still decided to give him only 20 years in prison, even though the law clearly provides for the death penalty in cases like his. Now, compare that to the treatment of Nnamdi Kanu, a man who, whether you agree with him or not, did not carry a gun, did not take part in armed attacks, and did not personally harm anybody. His actions were centered around speeches, opinions, and agitation. You may not support what he said, and you may not support his ideology, but the fact remains that his case is nowhere near the level of violent crimes committed by people who have terrorized entire communities. And yet, Nnamdi Kanu was given a life sentence, a punishment far more severe than what was given to someone who was directly involved in acts of terror. This is why many Nigerians raise their voices. This is why people talk about injustice, selective judgment, and unfair treatment. It is not about who you support politically or ethnically. It is not even about liking or disliking Nnamdi Kanu. It is deeper than that. It is about justice, fairness, equity, and the consistency of our legal system. When the laws are applied differently to different people, depending on who they are or what group they belong to, it destroys trust in the system. It makes ordinary citizens feel like their lives and their rights do not matter. At the end of the day, all Nigerians want is a country where the law is the same for everyone, where punishment matches the crime, and where justice is not influenced by bias or politics. Until that happens, people will keep speaking out, because silence would only allow the inequality to continue.